Hello. This is a fantastic space. In 2016, I was offered a job. I was in Sydney, and the organisation that I was offered a job to work for was in the UK, and it was the week after the Brexit vote. I was doing something that I loved. I was working for this company called Suncorp, and I was helping an organisation try to think about how the possibility of external change in the world might cause the individuals and the whole organisation to have to change. So I had questions. The job that I was offered was to come and lead this organisation, Climate-KIC. Climate, the KIC stands for Knowledge Innovation Community. It's Europe's largest climate innovation agency and community. And my response at the time was, look, I'm not a climate scientist, I'm not a climate expert, I love making change happen in the world, and it doesn't feel to me like I would have the qualifications to do what it sounds like climate action is about. And I was persuaded by a good friend who said, well, actually, we have a lot of climate science, but what we really need is people who know how to change people, human systems, economic systems, decision-making systems. So I took the gig, and here I am. And at first glance, Climate-KIC was a success story. In terms of innovation per se, a major success story. 32 accelerators, we were running 32 accelerators across Europe. We were contributing to half of the Forbes 30 under 30. We had success stories going on with startups. We also had some of the best known education programs in climate sustainability, entrepreneurship, and so on. But when it came to the problem that the organisation is in service of, actually climate change, a whole lot of questions began to open up. And they were questions about the nature of the problem itself and the way in which anyone working, acting to do something about that problem needs to start to comprehend scale, pace, depth, and the nature of it, the real underpinning nature. So that's the thing. Working on climate pulls you face to face into three really tricky elements that it takes a while to fully comprehend. And I don't mean comprehend intellectually, I mean comprehend somatically, fully, cognitively, imaginatively. The first is that complexity is a feature, not a bug. As we know, these are complex adaptive systems, the life support system of the planet. They are changing inexorably and rapidly, and they change and affect every aspect of our lives. So for human experience, the experience is one of radical uncertainty. It's not just climate, it's biodiversity, as we know. So that means crisis in food systems, collapses in multiple breadbaskets. We lose the green and ice sheet, we lose Vietnam and Indonesia. They're the two largest rice bowls in the world. We've had Ukraine mined. We will take 3 years to demine Ukraine. It's one of the largest wheat producing. It starts to drive home numbers on migration. 6 million people left Ukraine. We're talking about hundreds of millions. It's literally beyond our imagination. And it requires, therefore, something that is fundamentally, critically different in the way in which we engage. Something that takes us fully and firmly into the domain of complex, and that asks us to show up as people, as organizations, as collectives, who comprehend deeply what interdependence is and how things act on one another. The second thing you really have to face into, 6 or 7 years into being right in the heart of climate action, is it's not about climate, it's about people. It's us. Our entire design for life, in all senses, is a core root cause issue. Our assumptions about identity, our assumptions that are written into the texts that we hold sacred, that we understand as the way in which we still make sense even if we don't think we're religious and we don't espouse to cultural norms. Our root cause assumptions on the idea of exploiting nature, focusing on the short term, thinking in terms of materials and assets. Even the best policy in the world still talks about critical materials, strategic autonomy, exploitation, extraction models. So we have to do an extraordinary job of human transformation. And that curve, which is the curve of human transformation required to maintain anything close to what we agreed in 2021, and actually I just came from a meeting now about the fact that if you factor in justice, it's not 1.5, it's 1 degree that we can afford if you really want a just future that is livable. That curve, that shape of that, is entirely about human transformation. And the last element that I find on a daily basis I need to wrestle with is that the experience of acting on in climate is an experience of acting in collective trauma constantly. Guilt, a sense of inadequacy, irresponsibility, I will never be able to do enough, will we make it, how the hell do I face into my kids every night? How do you deal with the constant injection and work that it takes to create and hold emotional, social, collective, political, economic resiliency that is about the ability to deal with anxiety and collective trauma? How do you deal with a global immune system that is numbing itself down to barely noticing? Those are 3 things that I have discovered, learned, trialed, work with, and work every single day of the work that I'm doing. And that led to a decision to pivot the organization that I lead, Climate-KIC. To pivot it completely away from focusing on let's just provide a lot of solutions and hope that magically they'll join up, and start to actually work the ground of acting in concert with a sense of human development and transformation in ways that start to integrate and live on our skins what it means to act and think interdependently. So we launched a call to action. We reached out to cities, governments, city governments, regional governments, country governments, businesses, and what we sought was to try to do something fundamentally different, to seek to create systemic change, systemic action, to build, to harness, to design innovation systems, political economy systems that could work in this deeply complex, adaptive, interdependent, self-transforming way. Cut a long story short, we're now leading a European Union initiative, which is part of the Horizon Europe program and part of the European Green Deal. And it involves 112 cities in Europe, 100 in Europe and 12 on the edges of Europe, committing to decarbonize by 2030, 7 years. Madrid is one of them, Stockholm is one of them, Copenhagen, Paris, Rome, London. These are not London, Paris, Rome, not London. This is extraordinarily difficult, and this is not, and I'm not telling you this as a story of success. I'm telling you this as a story of deep, continuous learning. This is about working out how to harness every single aspect of what it means to inhabit space together in a collective combination of buildings, rules, rituals, informal and formal spaces that constitute urban space. And it's not only urban space, it's a story of deep learning, how to understand and support change, the power that learning has, its exponential qualities. The power laws in learning are the single greatest human capability to stop climate change. Most importantly, because they're the single greatest capability we have to transform ourselves in time. So, the 3 learnings and wayposts that I want to bring to you in this Inner Development Goals Forum on the topic of acting, from the journey, the learning journey, and the constant process of working the ground and working with leaders at every level, and communities and businesses at every level across Europe and indeed across the world. First things first, we had to change our organization to do this. And it was a change that had to do with coherence. This was about working out how could we actually be coherent with the type of transformative activities and the type of transformative thinking that we knew we were going to need. Most importantly, how could we make fractals? I acknowledge that you cannot walk miles and years with people to help them lead transformation that is completely impossible, at least on the textbook, if you are not capable and willing to self-transform, to literally walk piece by piece. It's from, and if I think about this has been the hardest thing of all, and would I say we've succeeded? Only partially. Because in this space, it's all about expertise. So this is about moving from playing expertise to playing jiu-jitsu, constantly working the angles and the moves to understand, how do you give energy to me? How do I give energy to you? How is decision-making happening here? It's not rational. No decision-making is rational. So some of that has also been, the second point, needing to learn to understand the human experience of transformation, making the human experience of transformation an object of design, meeting people where they are, understanding that the political economy of decision-making is not something that follows a knowledge-to-action path. This is a problem of a deficit of imagination. We are really struggling to imagine what it means to live sustainably in a way that is beneficial, aspirational, fun, enjoyable, playful, related to our own sense of identity. One of the most fascinating ways of working, we work in portfolio structures. So instead of saying, let's do energy, then we'll do buildings, and then there's transport, and over here we'll worry about food systems. Take the whole city. Take its structures, its places, its norms, its forms, its institutions. Build a portfolio of multiple, hundreds of interventions and hold them in relationship. Because it's the relationships that give us a chance. The combination of things that we didn't expect. The combination of things that create positive tipping points that are exponentially shifting of their own accord. But most importantly, notice the vertical axis. It has to connect to our sense of self. What really matters is agency and identity. The way Madrid decarbonizes is not the same as Vienna or as Stockholm. And that needs to be part of the design. How do I, in this place, with this meaning, with this sense of self, think of transformation, negotiate it, engage, and do something with it? And that means really also then working with leaders who are dealing with the most extraordinary political headwinds, fear, uncertainty, grief, anxiety, inadequacy, complex institutions they're hacking, they're trying to work with, they're living almost schizophrenic experiences. How do you bring qualities to that? Qualities that can live and work fluidly with the deep, profound complexity of what we're doing. The last reflection is one about the importance of creating new institutional forms. So the last thing that we have taken action to do is to decide it is also time to think in terms of dynamics and not of states, to think in terms like neuroplasticity. How do we create a collective capability plasticity? The kind of the forms with which collective intelligence and immune systems really start to work together. This is the launch of a group of organizations, one of them you'll hear from immediately following me, that have decided to do something to mobilize a deeply powerful collaborative action, to stop spending most of our time competing with each other to fundraise, or competing with each other to claim social media status, or the bravery, or the intelligence, or the creativity, or the extraordinariness of being the person that came up with how to solve something, but to get in the trenches together and start to work out how to work the relationships amongst us, and to put some level of deep collective effort behind that. And that really means leaning in to the dynamics of feeding hope and not despair. I'm going to finish with Tomorrowland, because you always need something in this kind of context that lifts us up to a sense of popular culture. If you've ever watched the film of Tomorrowland, there is the one Cherokee parable in it. There are two wolves inside all of us, hope and despair. They are constantly fighting. Which one wins? The one we feed. And it really is about that. Can we start thinking about what we are feeding? Because what we are feeding is what we get. Thank you.
Please just stay a second longer. Okay. Thank you so much, Kirsten, also for this wonderful note at the end. So, in order to feed the wolf of hope, what is it that makes you optimistic?
Well, I am always reminded of Gramsci. I'm a rationalist by force of will, and a pessimist by force of will, and no, a pessimist by force of reason, and an optimist by force of will. Sheer determination. I have watched, and I was thinking about where I started with the work that I was doing in Australia. I have watched people coming from all walks of life spend a year, just 1 year, and be completely transformed in their capacity to see. Their capacity to see themselves in the world, their capacity to see literally what is in the world and to make sense in profoundly different ways. I know that's possible. What I know of it is that it requires the kind of social space, mental, emotional space, collective space, to just give enough oxygen for that degree of discomfort to yield curiosity and creativity. And I consider my job is to hold space, hold the space of stability and curiosity and experimentation long enough to get through crisis.
Thank you so much for being in this with us. Ladies and gentlemen, Kirsten Dunlop.